With our guest, brother Joao, Jordao. Apologies for the dodgy pronunciation. But that aside, we got to quite an interesting point in your life, and this is the point where you had rejected, I think wouldn't be too strong a word, atheism.
Yep.
And you had subscribed to the idea of intelligent design, but you knew for a fact that Christianity wasn't necessarily the way to seek an answer to this intelligent design, although it was something that you came back to, which we'll try and explore a bit later, God willing. So what did you do? I mean, was it just a case of, okay, I believe in intelligent design, but you just carried on living your life, or were you actually starting to try and find out more?
I think naturally what you do is you start to ask questions in a more effective manner, but I think I kind of hit a roadblock, I think. From what I remember, I mean, there was no... I mean, because that must have been at age 15. And I don't remember any kind of moment of clarity since then. I mean, but it did awaken motivation to search for perhaps ideas which would lead me to a realization that was a bit more like what I was looking for, something that would make a bit more sense in regards to what I see myself as being scientifically minded, so I still needed something that was pragmatic, that made sense, didn't necessarily go out looking for it, and it didn't necessarily come until a little bit later, not that much later, a little bit later. Yeah, but I still remember putting myself out there, I think, as someone believing in God during that period.
Okay.
But it's not something that you can take through very far, because if you don't have something solid
to hold on
people
to,
will defeat you. Yeah, people will defeat you with one simple question, and you don't know what to say. But yeah.
So I mean, did you? You know, we are Westerners at the end of the day, and for a lot of people, when they think about becoming religious or changing their way of life, you know, there's this desire for something exotic. Did you go down the road of something exotic? You know, maybe did you think of becoming a monk or
I think
like
maybe
a Buddhist monk? I'm talking about
nothing. I mean, nothing exotic, but I think I would have been. I mean, also my family, it has to do with my family as well. Not only my family, but basically my friends. A lot of them were kind of upper middle class, European, and I did start. I was on the receiving end on a lot of what you call Eastern religions, but from a Western perspective. So maybe Buddhism, certain interpretations of Hinduism. Again, Hinduism is very diverse, but they're just, I mean, a lot of them are concepts. They're not so much a kind of body of thoughts that I would say stands on its own two feet. Certainly not in the way that it's communicated to us at this point. I mean, and like I said, I mean, it's this exact same thing in regards to Catholic Church. I mean, at this point, I really need something to clarify. I mean, something clear, and perhaps Buddhist concepts that I was, I mean, inevitably into contact with. Because I could have taken them. I'm sure I took them on board. Which is not to say that's something that I appropriated and never wanted to let go ever again. I think it was just a fairly kind of light influence here and there. But insofar as it opened up my pathway to any kind of spiritual trip, must have been a good thing. You know?
Okay. So when exactly did you actually come in contact with, encounter Islam?
Islam I came into contact with, it must have been in 2005, 2006. I mean, basically my first year of university, I moved to England from France. I was living in France before. I moved to England, and I was living in halls in Kingston University, and I had a really good friend of mine, a really good English friend of mine, who for some reason dropped out of his course 3 months after or something, so we moved out, and into his room, moved in, someone who's now one of my best friends. I mean, it's like a brother to me, a British man who's also of he's Iraqi-British. So obviously hall's a very small place, everybody knows each other, we got talking, and he's a very enthusiastic guy, and I'm very enthusiastic, and I love talking. I mean, basically there was such a lack for all those 3 months, a lack that I had of someone to speak with about politics and more controversial things, you know. A lot of people just want to talk about kind of broad subjects, which is fine, but at the end of the day, I wanted something really engaging. So it's refreshing to meet Ali, someone who's really passionate about politics. And so actually Islam, since it came through Ali and since it came in a very particular context, it came mainly, even though many times you would obviously introduce Islamic concepts in their own right, a lot of times they come into the field of politics. So we'd start talking about politics, certain events, and then he would make sure to bring in his opinion and make sure I would know that that's the Islamic point of view, or that's what Islam has to say about that, or this is a certain important person we've had in the history of Islam and he did this. And so slowly started engaging me, and that really, my interest started growing. But again, mainly it was political. Mainly was, which is not very limited, because obviously in politics you get a space for any kind of concept, any kind of belief to come into as well. So it's rich enough. It's rich enough. And it stayed political for quite a long time. So that's my introduction to Islam, was Islam perhaps in a political context, or perhaps appliance of Islamic context into politics.
Okay, so at this particular point in your life, you were, maybe even up until now, were very much interested in politics. And so the discourse that you were engaging in with this brother called Ali, it enabled you to have a window into Islam.
Absolutely. I mean, especially the concept of justice was something that came back again and again and again. And so yeah, I think at this point maybe a sense of familiarity, which a lot of people feel, coming into contact with certain concepts and certain beliefs that I started feeling, which was not a surprise. I mean, it's obviously not a surprise that I would find some common points between me and someone perhaps from a different school of thought. I mean, it's always bound to happen. More and more, I think it started becoming more visible. And I think the way it changed is because of the Quran, obviously. Because talking about politics and all these things would be said, a lot of disagreements. I mean, a huge amount of disagreements, really interesting debates, really interesting conversations. And I think there are a couple of things which kind of changed the path of this experience. I think one of them, something which I still find is not the best way to phrase it, but basically Ali said, Islam is perfect. Islam is perfect. And I said, because of the kind of philosophies that I've been in contact before, I said, wait a minute, that doesn't really fit in, that doesn't really fit with I mean, surely there's something wrong with it. Which is not to say that I completely agree with the word perfect in this context. It's just quite an interesting story. And I said, well, that's impossible. And he said, how do you know? You've never read it. You've never read the Quran. And I said, well, I don't need to read the Quran. I know that it's not perfect by definition, because I've got this whole set of other ideas which tells you that by definition would have some kind of mistake. The important of this, obviously, is that Ali very intelligently kind of took this. He saw an opportunity, and what's he going to do? He's going to introduce a challenge. He's going to say a challenge. Well, find out for yourself. This is the confidence that we have to have as Muslims. To any person you say, find out for yourself. You need to give him the Quran, because we have nothing. There's nothing in here that we're ashamed of. By all means, take on. So he gave me a Quran. I took some time to really open it.
So he gave you the Quran for you to find out, for you to try and prove that Islam is imperfect.
Yeah, to prove to him as a continuation of our debates, because he said, well, obviously we were annoyed each on our part because we weren't agreeing, and it has to be settled at the end of the day. It's an important issue. So he gave me the Quran for me to substantiate my claim that nothing can be perfect as such. Obviously, he knew what he was doing. He was kind of giving it to me for me to come into contact with it anyway.
So so how did it work out? I mean, the reason why I'm asking this question is because for me, when I first encountered the Quran, it's almost a bit embarrassing to say it now, but it's the truth. I was looking, hoping even to find some contradictions in this Quran, because I'd heard about this verse where Allah says, if there were two gods, then surely there would be contradictions in this book. So this was my motivation. If I could find some contradictions, then I wouldn't have to become a Muslim. I wouldn't have to listen to all these debates about religion anymore. I've got my excuse. Yeah. Even if there is a day of judgment, I can say to God, look, this is what I found in your book. So
absolutely. I mean, there was like a challenge on his part, but there was an intent on my part as well to find it. I mean, obviously, I wasn't just gonna pick it up and kind of dismiss anything that not so much didn't agree with, but I mean, there's a difference between things you don't agree with and a contradiction.
Yes.
I mean, there's still plenty of things which I read, I find them a bit hard to digest. I think about it for a time. Eventually, I come to terms with it and I find it amazing, but it's not to say that at that point, if I had encountered something which I mean, there can be contradictions in a book. You can say one thing and then say completely the other. So I was looking for them to kind of prove to Ali that perhaps you shouldn't say these kind of things, So say these kind of things that Islam is perfect and so on. I mean, but again, I did take a while to really delve into it, but I would kind of skip through it, and the literary quality that had been, it wasn't just Ali. I mean, it's other people who had spoken about the literary quality of the Quran. It's very important because I'm really, really, really interested by writing, especially by creative writing and journalism as well. I was studying journalism at the time, and for me, I mean, there's nothing better than a good book which knows how to use words in a very precise way. So I think from the beginning, even though I didn't have time and I didn't perhaps have the patience that I should have had to straight away deal with it and read the whole of the Quran, try and find mistakes and trying to get my head around it, mainly I was just exposed to bits and bobs, but it does impose a certain degree of respect. I mean, any little passage will tell you that it's a serious book.
What about the substance of the Quran? The reason why I'm asking this is that you could read something that is very, very expressive and as you say, using the words in the right places, very flowery in its expression, but may have very little or no substance to it. I mean,
Something quite interesting that I found recently, it's quite interesting that you say that. Because when you speak, going back to the whole flowery and pretty versus functional and with substance, I think that I had a teacher in school who told me that stylistic features are only good if they serve a purpose. And mainly he said, my teacher always told me that a stylistic feature that will be successfully implemented will be something that backs up the whatever substance there is there and then enhances it, like spices would do to real food.
Yeah.
So
nice way, yeah.
So obviously, but I mean myself, I was always, as a youngster, I was always quite gifted with flower writing, not so much with substance. What I found in the Quran is that, and here I'm gonna bring in, because a lot of people, when they speak about the Quran, I think, rightly so, they'll speak about it in a very mystical way. Yeah, they'll speak about it in a very, very poetic way. They'll talk about the beauty, but in regards to actual substance, I think there is someone very interesting enough, one of the best writers of all time, called Johann von Goethe. This German man is actually it's quite surprisingly enough, he's one of the most respected philosophers of all time and widely regarded to be one of the best German writers of all time. And there's something he said about the Quran, which is precisely what I mean. Is he says the Quran will remain forever effective. It will remain forever effective. He didn't say it is pretty today and tomorrow might stop being pretty, because stylistic effects can come in and out of fashion.
Yes.
So what I saw in the Quran is this amazing honesty and this direction, and it really worked. I mean, no matter what, if you open the Quran, you will feel emotion. And that's one of the first pointers to a text of quality. A text of quality cannot cultivate indifference. I think indifference points to mediocrity. I think first and foremost, what I saw in the Quran is an incredible direct approach to language. The actual way it uses the language. How it weighs certain verses against the others. And then obviously I started analyzing a bit more. And I mean, when I use the same tools that I used in school to analyze creative writing to the Quran, I was blown away. Because basically, I mean, I was given very precise ideas of questions that you should ask yourself in regards to a text.
Really?
This is something really important, because, I mean, what you'll be taught in school is you'll be taught to analyze text, but always keeping your mind and knowing that it is produced by a human being, of course, because it's a book, it's produced by a human being.
Yes.
So when you're writing a poem, you're supposed to always analyze substance, stylistic effects, the manner of the use of the words in regards to the author. What does the author want you to believe? Where's the author taking this? What does the author want? What does the author want to give away? And so when I apply this, I found it completely baffling, because it's so honest, it's so raw, that I started getting a kind of glitch, if you will. Where is this coming from? What does this author want me to do? And eventually, this is later on, I came into contact with a verse which, obviously now one of the very basic concepts of Islam, I know, but I didn't know it at the time. I came into contact with the concept of God not wanting anything, of God being needless, and God being self-sufficient. And so increasingly, when I apply these kind of methodologies of examining a text, hopefully trying to find out something about the author, I really started I started really struggling with attaching a want and a need to this author. I said, it cannot be. It's so honest, it's so straightforward, to the point where sometimes you kind of feel, wait a minute, does it say this? I thought maybe they're going to try to prolong this a bit, but no, it's just there, bam, it's very direct. And so at this point I started really asking questions, because the Quran claims a lot of things and it delivers it. One of the things it claims, it says it's written by God and God is needless. And at this point you really start thinking, it's starting to deliver here, after 2, 3, 4 pages, it really starts to deliver where it promises, and this spans to this day, I mean, I'm not as surprised anymore when I see this type of quality, but there are moments where you really are kind of blown away, seriously.
Alhamdulillah. So, I mean, you've given us a very, very beautiful description of the emotion that you must have been experiencing when you read the Quran, and alhamdulillah. I mean, the question I have is, at what point now? I mean, after this type of experience, no doubt you must have decided to become a Muslim at some point.
Yeah.
When did you decide to become a Muslim?
I'm not really sure. I think it was a succession of nights, perhaps with experiences or situations that I would find myself in, and I've heard this from other converts, is that I think there's a huge amount of resistance.
Yes.
Especially because I think you start feeling on one side, yeah, you have such an amount of love and such an amount of interest for this set of ideals. But on the other side, you're not really sure of what people might want to impose upon you, what they might want from you, what they might kind of corner you into. So there's a lot of resistance into perhaps expressing it and doing something with it. Because there are a lot of people, I mean, anyone, if you have an articulate, kind, compassionate Muslim who knows his religion, and I mean, you can put in front of him or her the most stubborn of people. I mean, if you give that Muslim enough time, that person will eventually gain some kind of respect. They will realize, okay, I don't necessarily want to become a Muslim, I don't necessarily believe that what you're saying is the truth, but they will inevitably realize, whether they admit it or not, there's some kind of quality, there's some kind of serious approach, there's some kind of substance, there's some kind of clarity in Islam. It's a huge step from that realization to actually wanting to embrace it yourself. But there was a feeling that not only I wanted to get more involved with these ideas, I also started wanting to get more involved with people, with Muslim people. I mean, I was exposed to a Muslim family, Ali's family. I mean, I was exposed to Muslim ways of life, conversations, debates. I wanted to engage much more closely, but I think there's still a lot of resistance, especially in dealing with restrictions that are going to come your way.
Yes.
And that was perhaps, if anything, I think that was what delayed it by a couple of months. I mean, it really didn't take that long, but I think it must have delayed it by a couple of months.
I think you need to give yourself a pat on the back. I know people who this process of resistance, 15, 20 years before actually converting.
Absolutely.
So, alhamdulillah. What about your family? How did they take to it? I know you said they were quite liberal, but...
My family's fine. I think it's not so much that they underestimate me, I think they underestimate Islam, and for that reason I think now more and more I can tell that it's going away. But I was very young at the time. I must have been 18, 19, and so I think my parents thought it was just a
phase.
He went to university, hung out with a couple of Muslims, thought it was cool.
He's in the UK, he's quite a cosmopolitan.
Exactly, these things happen. Not to say that they necessarily see as a negative that must go away at all costs, but I think they thought, it's just a phase, he's going to move away from it, and he'll just go back, perhaps having learned from it, but not necessarily coming to the dinner table saying, I will not eat pork, or not necessarily coming into a conversation saying, I believe in this, and prove me wrong if you can. I think they would have thought that's something that I would take in my stride rather than hold on to. I think now slowly they're starting to realize that it's something that's quite deep. It's become quite an integral part of how I feel.
Part and parcel of who you are.
I mean, it'd be quite hard to kind of leave behind. I mean, and I think they realize it because of my enthusiasm. when I speak about philosophical Islam. I think it's very easy for parents to, I mean, if you go to your parents and say, I love Islam because I met a really cool Muslim guy, or I love Islam because Muslims are being oppressed all over the world. I think it's easy to think, okay, this is just a passing thing because it's not always going to be true, is it? But I think when they see me really enthusiastically speaking about a set of ideas and speaking quite confidently, I think slowly they're coming into terms, and quite positively so.
It sounds as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as though they've not just reached the stage where they have accepted the fact that, okay, our son has become a Muslim, but they're actually quite happy for you.
I mean, there are also a few things which, funny episode. I mean, I was in the mosque. Oh, and by the way, one thing, I mean, I think that it really depends. I mean, because your parents are your parents, so obviously they will see changes in you.
Yes.
If there is a change, if at the point where you take the Shahada, or either that fixed point of the Shahada you said it, or
later on,
that period of learning, obviously hopefully there will be some kind of change.
Yes.
Hopefully there will be change, there will be positive or negative change. I think, I like to think that they must have noticed some positive change. There is obviously a realization on their part that obviously a lot of the things which come with Islam go hand in hand with healthy lifestyle. Things that everyone will, I mean, any mother's going to be happy to see her son saying, I'm going to try and get away from alcohol the best I can. I think any mother is going to say, that is a good thing. That is a very good thing. I mean, try to stay away from excesses. Try and be more thoughtful. Try and give money to charity. I think these are things which are binding, and obviously they'll be quite happy for. Obviously, I think they're already, I mean, mind you, Islam is a part of a whole. And it works truly as a part of a whole. And I think there's an understanding in Islam that obviously you have duties towards your parents, and that's something that's really, really, I mean, I think it helps any convert that's going through trouble. I mean, thank God, I never had any kind of big trouble with my family, you know, thank God. But any Muslim that does have perhaps resistance, even animosity, being disowned, aggression, violence, who knows, you know? I mean, reactions come in many, many different formats. When, I mean, it's very, very touchy subject for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think in the event of that happening, there are already things in Islam that will help you to get through it. I mean, there's an understanding of Islam that even if your parents perhaps react negatively, it doesn't necessarily limit your duties towards your parents. And I think it's something that's really helped. I've been trying to be kinder, trying to be more attentionate, trying to be a better son, and I've noticed that, I mean, it's much better than what I was told to do before, basically. I mean, in Islam, adulthood is about respecting your parents.
Yes.
You know, unfortunately for a lot of people, adulthood is about rejecting your parents. I think, going back to functionality, it's not about, I'm not going to make some abstract moral argument. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't bring you peace of mind. So, and I think my parents have noticed, you know, God willing, they will have noticed that I'm trying to be a better son, and hopefully they will realize that it's partly because of Islam, and hopefully that will help, I think.
I'm sure, even though they may not say it to you, but then again, your parents are quite liberal, so they may well do. I'm sure they're actually very happy with the fact that you're Muslim, and you know, and of course, if they see that you're happy yourself, then they'll be happy just for the fact that, you know, they always want the best for their children. Unfortunately, we don't really have much time left. I wanted to maybe try and explore this concept of, or not concept, what you were mentioning earlier about how you came to understand Christianity better after you became a Muslim.
Absolutely, because basically, I mean, Portugal is I feel as though, I mean, so I didn't know, by the way, in the beginning that there was an overlapping of, I mean, I would have known that there was an overlapping of ideas. I did not know there was an overlapping of important figures. You know, I did not know that Islamic prophets, that they share a lot of them with Christianity. I mean, what I feel is that, in particular with my relationship with Jesus, peace be upon him, is that Islam clarified. Islam clarified what our relationship with Jesus should be, and most importantly, in regards to Catholicism, it clarified the relationship between Jesus, peace be upon him, and God, which is really, really, really important.
Yes.
Because it's not done enough.
Yes.
It's really not done enough, unfortunately. And so I'm really happy that I can go back to Portugal and engage with the religion and and ideas which are central to my very country and to who we are. So I don't have to, and I will not go back. I mean, there's a lot, by the way, there's a lot of I mean, I go back, I say I'm a Muslim. Some people think it's very funny, you know, it's very, very unusual in Portugal. Some people think it's funny. I mean, after all, hopefully interesting ideas and debates come.
But sorry to just interrupt because we have run out of time. I just wanted to ask, just as a final comment, with regards to your understanding, your relationship with the actual imams of the Ahlul Bayt and so on and so forth. Has this helped you in your path of Islam?
Absolutely. I mean, I try to take like a wholesome, I try my best to be exposed to different ways of thought within Islam, different ideas, so as to try and get a wholesome, not only idea of what Islam is and understanding, but a wholesome approach to Muslims, because Muslims come in varieties. I mean, what I will say is that especially now, I'm particularly fond of the work of Imam Ali, even though it's obviously someone who, since the very beginning, was spoken a lot to me. I think a lot of people speak about Imam Ali's life, which is great. Lately, I've really delved into his sermons, and that's interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, in particular, I'm very fond of one particular speech, which I very, very often use, and I think for me, that's what the Imams are supposed to be, and that's what I try to make of it, is a pathway towards the work of Prophet Muhammad and the religious of Islam that is trustworthy.
Okay.
That's trustworthy and that works.
Thank you very, very much. It's been very interesting.
Thank
I wish
you.
we could go on for another hour. Maybe, inshallah, at some day in the future, we could get you back in and we could talk some more, especially about your experiences of the sermons of Imam Ali alayhi salam. I know you have a very scientific way of looking at things. But thank you very much for joining us, Brother Jordao, who has been telling us about his very interesting path to Islam and his life thereafter.